Hello, scientists, and welcome to Math Bootcamp. As you've started working through Unit 0, you've begun learning a lot of skills and practices that are necessary to be successful in science. Many of the skills that you need to be most successful in science are actually math skills. Today, and in the next lessons, we are going to be working through our mini math bootcamp, where we are going to be learning and practicing several of those math skills that you will need throughout the year in science. Today, we're going to start by looking at calculating averages. So before we look at how to actually calculate an average, let's talk about what an average is and why it is so important in science. So an average is a value that simply takes a large amount of values or data points and summarizes them or gives us an overall big picture of what those values are telling us. Averages are so important in science because they do just that. As scientists, we often collect large amounts of data or need to analyze and interpret large amounts of data. Oftentimes, many of those numbers are not exactly the same. So in order to get a big picture idea of what the data is telling us, we want to use an average. So now let's look at how we use this formula to calculate the average of any amount of data points. To calculate the average of any group of values, we use the following formula. The average of those values is equal to the sum, that means added together, of all of the values in the set, divided by the number of values inside of that set. So again, an average allows us to take a group of numbers and summarize them into one value that gives us the big picture of that entire set. Now let's talk about a couple examples here of averages of different data sets, and then we'll walk through actually utilizing the formula to calculate an average. So if we look here at this first example, we see that we have 4 different values, 84, 62, 97, and 73. As you can see clearly, those numbers relatively have some large distance between them. So some are much higher than the others. So in order to get a summary or the best possible picture of what those numbers are doing, I would get an average. And as we can see in this case, the average would come to 79. Another interesting thing to point out is if you look down here at the bottom, we can see that we have 3 different data sets, X1, X2, and X3. As you can see, all 3 of them are made up of very different numbers. However, if we take the average of all 3 of them, we see that we get the exact same value, 15. So as you can see, again, averages really give us the big picture of the entire set of data. Now, let's look at this example and actually work through calculating an average using our average formula. So let's read our example. It says the heights of 5 students are provided below. Calculate the average height of the students in the group.
So in order to calculate the average height of this group of students, there's a few things that we'll want to know. Let's take a look at our average formula to remind ourselves what we will need to know in order to calculate the average. So we know that to calculate an average, we need to know the sum of the values and divide it by the number of values in the set. So the first thing we want to find out is the sum of the values. In this case, the values are the height of the students. So to find the sum, you simply take all of the students' heights and add them together. So in our case, that will look like 150 plus 160 plus 170 plus 180 plus 180, which gives me a total or a sum of 840. The next thing that we need to do in order to calculate an average is find out the number of values in our set. In this case, there are 5 students. Therefore, I have 5 height values in my set. Now we're ready to calculate our average. To get the average height of the students in this group, we will simply take that sum of all of the values or the sum of all of those students' height, which we calculated to be 840 centimeters, and divide it by the number of values in that set, which again, we've just determined are 5. You will simply then divide 840 by 5 to get your average, which in this case comes to 168 centimeters. This tells us that the average height of the students in this particular group is 168 centimeters.